Hello, friends. Welcome to the Living Truth Podcast. This is Kristin Cary hosting today. It is such a treat for me to introduce you guys to Shelley Martinkus. Shelley, thank you for being on the Living Truth Podcast with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for our time.
Oh, me too. I have been waiting for this for so long. I've never met Shelley, but I've been a huge fan and admirer of her work for so many years. Shelley and her husband Jason started working in this field of sexual addiction, problematic sexual behavior, and betrayal trauma in 2007. So they are some major forerunners in this arena. They have a podcast, Redemptive Living is the name of their ministry. Shelley is a licensed professional coach. She runs groups for women. She does one-on-one coaching and couples coaching and has created courses. And you can't see this if you're listening, but if you're watching on the YouTube channel, Rescued is her workbook, which came out a good 10 plus years ago and
Yeah.
was a workbook that when Women in the Battle started in 2016, was the second workbook we took our members through because it had just come out, and it is rich and deep and so good. And so I have been an admirer of Shelley's work for so long. I'm so grateful to actually meet you face to face over Zoom and have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate just being here. I'm honored.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So, you guys, here's what we're going to talk about. Shelley and I were discussing offline before we started recording about the flood of information available to us today when we're dealing with betrayal trauma. So, Shelley, my first discovery was in '04. I'm curious about your year of your first discovery.
Oh, two.
Okay, so really close. Okay,
Yes.
in that
Yes.
era, how much great information and help could you find about betrayal trauma?
Yeah. Very little. And to be clear, O two is when I knew something was wrong. O three is when the mocha really hit the fan. And so we were literally like a year
Yeah.
apart, it sounded
Uh-huh.
like. And no, very little. I remember I called a radio show and found out about an in-person, a local support group, but it was just a weekend group. And I lived in Dallas at the time, Dallas, Texas. And ultimately, I was like, no way, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. I am not about to go drive into Dallas and walk into, a
Yeah.
counselor's office and sit with other women that are going through this. So besides, that, and then there were a couple of books that I was able to find, but there was little to no besides that. Literally, that's all I recall. What about for you? I'm curious, what do you
Yeah.
remember back in '04?
Oh, like minimal.
Yeah.
We had a local marriage counselor who had no training in this area, as most counselors do not have training in this area. Listeners, if you're not already aware of this, is like I think most people would think if you go to if you go to school to be a counselor, of course you're going to learn about infidelity, sexual betrayal, sexual addiction, but no, you don't unless you go to specialized training. It's kind of like thinking, oh, every MD is going to know how to do open heart surgery. I know
Mm.
that to us, that sounds silly because we know MDs, to be a heart surgeon, you have to go to specialized training. Well, same thing
Yeah.
for this issue.
Yeah.
But most people don't realize that. Most, well-meaning people helpers, pastors, people in the church are going to send you to marriage counseling, which is actually not a good idea unless that person has specialized training like IRCM, like empathy training, right? So,
Yeah.
okay. Shelley, no, terrible help. Help that hurt is what I found because
Mhm.
I was, labeled as co-addict, and
Mhm.
everything I could find made me part of the problem, which just further exacerbated the shame. So today is a different story, isn't it?
Mhm. For sure. And I want to go back to,
Yeah.
2003, 2004. So thank goodness we actually first met with the pastor that married us. And he, out of the gate, said, Jason, you have a sexual addiction
Oh,
and you
wow.
need help. And I was like, I had never even heard of a sexual addiction, never even heard those two words being put together. And I was like, I was offended actually. I was like, you have got to be kidding me that we are going to label my husband's adultery as a diagnosis, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yes.
And so I was offended. And also I look back and I'm like, you know what? God, it was huge that that pastor knew what he was talking about and could identify it. Well, fast forward, we go back to Dallas. We had been to my hometown for a weekend, talked to him. We go back to Dallas. The first therapist we talked to looked at me, well, listened to Jason, heard what all he had to share as far as what all had happened, looked at me, I kid you not, Kristen, said, I know you're like bracing over there. You're like, oh gosh, what is he about to say? Yes. Looked at me and said, so Shelley, what did you do to contribute to this? And
It's an
it,
assumption that
yeah,
you contributed. Yeah.
I mean, it like whatever parts of my heart weren't broken, they were now. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I was just so crushed. I remember crying. We left I don't know how we got through. I don't even remember the rest of the session, but we left. And I was like, I will never go back to him ever again. And we never did. So same
Good for
experience as
you.
you. Absolutely. Yeah. Same experience as you. And you would think that fast forward in the year of our Lord 2025, 2026, that we would not be hearing about this anymore.
No, but
And
it
that's
still
not the case.
happens. It
It
absolutely
still
still
happens.
happens because they're not trained
Yeah.
in this issue is not it's not alcoholism. It's not drug addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's not sex addiction. Sometimes
True.
it's I mean and I don't know that it totally matters to label is it an addiction or a sexual integrity problem? Like the
Yeah.
point is that it is maladaptive
Mm-hmm.
behavior
Mm-hmm.
that is damaging to a marriage covenant
Yes.
and is completely the responsibility of the person breaching the covenant, not their spouse.
Right, right. And that doesn't mean, yeah, you know, a couple of comments there. And I know we maybe are going down a rabbit hole,
It's
but
okay. They're
okay.
good rabbit holes, Shelley.
Okay, yes. So, you know, some women, they need to know, is it an addiction?
Yes.
Or is it a sexual integrity issue? And we can capture all of your listeners by saying all of them have all of these for us, we work with men with sexual integrity issues, right? So
Yes.
I'm at Redemptive Living. I don't know if that's the case.
It is for us too.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
That'll make it easy. So we can say like, hey, they have sexual integrity issues. Some of them are addicts. Like they
Hmm.
have some of those markers. They're compulsive.
Yeah.
They're impulsive. They desire to stop, but they can't, if you will, or choose
Yeah.
not to. So there's these markers that can help us see, yes, this is an addiction. I think women sometimes they think that there's more help for him if it is an addiction. Sometimes women see it as more hopeful versus a
Mm.
sexual integrity issue. But I also talk to women where they're like, oh no, if it is an addiction, that's a death sentence. So it's really interesting. Sometimes it's important to women to know that,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's not. And there's conflicting, you know, there's just different opinions on that piece. There was something else though,
Totally.
that you were just saying that I wanted to comment on. There was a second thing and I've now lost it. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I've lost it. Something about we were talking about, is it a sexual integrity issue or an addiction? Oh, nope,
It'll
not
come back. If you need to
okay.
say it, it'll come back to you. And we can always chalk it up to trauma brain, right?
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
When
Or
I forget something
perimenopause.
completely, it
Yeah.
happens. It happens. Okay, so Shelley, in today's day,
Hmm.
there
Hmm.
is people have a flood of information about this topic available to them. So much And there are so many wonderful, amazing professionals in this field contributing incredible work.
Yeah.
And there is a deep longing and desire when we're so shattered and crushed by betrayal to find the right path. And I'm going to use air quotes around the right path because we think, well, if I can go from step A, B, C, D, E, like in order, then this can be healed and fixed, right? And the reality is that information, as good as important as it is not a magic bullet to heal.
Right.
It is not. And while some things are somewhat linear in nature, like, for example, should you start rebuilding trust before you know the full truth about the acting out behaviors?
Mhm.
No, like that should be an order. Like
Yeah.
you would, if you want a full disclosure, for example,
Yeah.
and a polygraph. And listeners, if you're like, what did she just say? There's another episode I'll link in the description with Dr. Janice Caudill and Dan Drake about full disclosure as a therapeutic process. It's not something you do on your own, but you do it with professionals in a guided format because lying and deception is so part of this problem
Mhm.
that when people try to push trust your husband, but you don't have the truth, like, so that's an example of something that needs to happen in order. But the linear nature of fully plunging the depths of every concept of information,
Mhm.
understanding and knowing it all is insufficient to heal our shattered hearts. But
Mhm.
in an age of information, where you can be on a never ending hamster wheel of acquiring more and more and more and more and more knowledge,
Yeah.
that becomes really tricky.
It really does. And it's almost like there's been this pendulum swing. Back in the early 2000s, there wasn't enough information. There weren't support groups and there weren't women saying, "Hey, me too."
Yeah.
Now we've kind of, it's still, I think, a very isolated situation for
Yes.
women. It's still very isolating, but the pendulum has really swung to this other side where there is so much information that I think it can be overwhelming for women. And like you, I love that you use the word magic bullet.
Mhm.
It's almost like what I see with the women coming to us, they are hastily spinning their wheels, looking for the person, the thing that is going to shift things for good. And I think that, I kind of use the analogy of snorkeling
Mhm.
versus scuba diving.
I love that.
Yeah, and it's almost like, and men are doing this as well, not just, I mean, men and
Yeah.
women, just there's so much just hitting the surface of everything versus doing the deeper work. And I almost like what I want to say is I want to assure your listeners that it's less about finding the exact information that you need out there
Mhm.
and more about taking some information and sitting with it, grappling with it, processing it, allowing it to change us from the inside out, and then continuing to. I think there's just a faith component almost that we're missing. Having
Mm.
faith that, like, okay, I'm going to sit here under, under living truth's wing, if you will, or covering, and I'm going to go as deep as I can here, and then I'll reassess on the back end and figure out where I need to go from there. But so much of this is like it's within us to heal because of the power of Jesus versus Googling and all the information, doing all the things out there.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So good. You know what I was thinking about when you were talking is when you're snorkeling, when you're staying at that top layer of all the information, let me explore everything that there is out there. it is, it can feel soothing because of the level of distraction that
Yeah.
is at our fingertips with the internet and the ability to Google and find more information, and which leads to this video, which leads to that video, which leads to this podcast and that podcast. And when you're in that level of, I mean, there is a dopamine hit too
That's
involved,
what I was writing down.
which can feel calming and like soothing and regulating. But the question is, are you really achieving and experiencing and practicing a felt sense of safety in your own body, which has been hijacked by trauma, right? And is like all of the trauma symptoms that we experience, like the racing heart, the intrusive thoughts, the sleeplessness, inability to eat, all the things.
Mhm.
Are you really developing that felt sense of safety in yourself and or in your relationship, if that's salvageable? Or are you just anesthetizing
Oh,
the
yeah,
pain?
right. Well, and that's exactly, I was just thinking, I was like, we collectively were addicted to information.
Oh, yeah.
Like we're addicted to those dopamine hits. And that's yeah, I mean, I think we really need to work at how can we move that pendulum back to midline, and what does that look like? And I have an analogy, and I wonder if your listeners or if you will relate to this. But when Jason did his disclosure way back when, I remember thinking after the fact, we had a great therapist, thank goodness, that a different therapist. Okay, we
Yeah.
left that old one after one session, and he was like, absolutely, ask Jason all the questions you need to. You guys need to be processing this. There's no statute of limitations. You just continue to process this together and ask. And I remember consciously at one point, months after, thinking, maybe it was weeks after, but it was probably months after, thinking, if I can just fully wrap my head around what he did, if I can just like, I just need to ask him a few more questions about that one incident, that one woman, that one, whatever, right? It, maybe it, maybe it'll take away the pain. Maybe it will take away the hurt. And I had to get to a place where I realized, oh, I'm a huge fan of asking questions, by the way. I don't know where you land on that, but yeah, I'm a huge
Oh, yeah.
fan of asking questions, ask the same question
Yes.
1,000 times, whatever you need to do. And I also realized, oh, even if up here in my head, I fully get it and understand, which I never was able to, by the way, I still have to tend to my heart. That it will not take away the pain. And so the same with what we're talking about. I think it's almost like just connecting that to this information overload. I think there is a part of us, and I want your listeners to really consider, is that subconsciously what's happening? Am I like, if I can just get this information, I won't have to deal with the pain? Because that's not the case. No matter
Not.
what, we're going to have to do that deep internal work and deal with the pain.
Yes, and that is very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's so uncomfortable. And like I know in our group process, in Women in the Battle, like a big part of what I am teaching women to do is how to regulate their nervous system and how to notice the stress response because it happens a lot. I mean, it happens a lot in normal life for
Yes.
anybody who was raised with, stressed out parents or trauma.
Mhm.
It can be a baseline for our nervous system, right? But God has so much more for us. He has so much better for us to be able to walk in a place of peace and safety when we learn what our nervous system is doing and we learn how to calm and regulate it.
Yeah.
And so that's a big tool that I think can help support if women are listening and you're like, wait, but how do I sink into my heart and stay with it? Like, I love what Shelley was saying. If you're in a group, and it's serving you well, like it's not toxic information like Shelley's ex-therapist. If you're in a group or with a therapist and they're trained in this issue and it's slow, but you're getting some progress, maybe just breathe through it
Mhm.
rather than I'm going to look for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Another tool that, in terms of practically speaking, how do we scuba dive instead of snorkel with this?
Yeah.
Is that learning what is happening in your body and your nervous system and how to regulate it. Learning how to experience overwhelming emotions without allowing it to tank us so that we're non-functional
Mhm.
is a
Mhm.
skill. And that is not a fun piece of information to learn because in order to really learn it, you have to practice it. And it's extremely uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes, it is. It is. So much of what we do, I feel like, is number one, awareness.
Yep.
Being aware, being able to name what's having the words. And I think that's why the group process is so important, is other women are sharing from their heart and they're able to put into words things that maybe I didn't have the words for. I felt it, but I just didn't have the words for it.
Yeah.
And so putting things into words, naming it, that is a huge piece of the process. And by the way, when it comes to naming, that when we're able to name things, and you know this, Daniel Siegel talks about we name it to tame it. It helps calm our limbic system. So
Yes.
that also helps with us, just what you're talking about is just regulating our nervous system, naming what we're experiencing. But naming also, it gives us authority over what's happening. Just like when God tasked Adam with naming the birds and the animals, that gave him authority over it. So, same with when we can name what's happening, it gives us, to a certain extent, some agency and some authority over it, if you will. So, number one is awareness and naming. That's so, so important. And then I had a second one, and this is happening again. You're going to have to probably edit this out.
No,
Goodness.
I'm not going to. I like the raw footage because
Okay,
you're a
good.
real person and so am I.
Yeah, that's right. The other piece I think that can be so important after awareness and naming things is we have to live it out. We have to, and something that you were just sharing made me think about that. Like we have to, like, okay, how do I connect to my heart? How do I let this sink into my heart? There is this, I had a client this week and she was like, you know what? I'll kind of make some of this up just in the, for confidentiality, but I just feel so replaceable. That's been a huge wound of mine that I've had to work through over the last many decades is just feeling replaceable. Well, how do I heal that wound? Part of it, a big part of it is living out that I'm not replaceable. Say, let's just say it's invisible. I feel invisible. Well, we heal that by living out that we are visible. And so we raise our hand and we ask the question and we go first in the group when the facilitator's like, "Hey, who wants to share?" Right? So the living it out is also really key.
It really is. It really is. Okay, so you know how you were talking about the very first time you had the opportunity to go to a group and you were like, no way, I'm not walking into
Yeah.
a group of women. And the irony I just realized right now, and now you lead groups.
Yeah. Isn't
And
that funny?
so, why do you think, what was that hesitation for you and that fear of going into that room of women?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, I was not ready to face this.
Mm,
I was not ready to face this pain.
yeah.
I don't think it was partly probably denial, an appropriate level of denial.
What about maybe shock? I feel like
Yeah.
shock, the term shock is more compassionate than denial.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and when I say denial, I don't mean that in a negative way, but yes, like
Right.
I was in shock
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just yeah, like I just wasn't ready to face it. I was about to say I just wasn't sure that I had the skills to face it. And I don't know fully if that was the case, if I didn't have the skills. I think it was just more, I just wasn't ready. I just was, and I think you
Absolutely.
do have to be ready,
Uh-huh. I
you
agree.
know?
I agree. And in some ways, this is a phrase that I don't know how it'll land with people. And so don't take this as a unilateral phrase, but in some things that I have some pain and regret in my own life, not even necessarily related to betrayal.
Hmm.
When I kind of start beating myself up about, well, I shoulda, coulda, just any kind of self-blame and criticism and judgment.
Hmm.
What I've heard the Lord whispering to my heart lately is, what if this is unfolding exactly as it needs to? And
Mm.
this space of like, if, like rather than all the regret and the I could have done this better, I could have done that better, which listeners, sometimes that is a part of grief. It's the bargaining part of grief. When
Yes.
we look back and we think, well, if I could have caught him sooner or could have known this when my gut said something was and all that, that is part of the grief process.
Mhm.
Bargaining can feel like this false form of power, like I could have gone back and changed it, but in this case you couldn't have.
Right.
And with the group thing, it's like, and maybe you really weren't ready. And so I wonder how many of our listeners are like, oh, I'll listen to a podcast, but I ain't going to no group. And so, seriously, so let this be a place of compassion for them to hear Shelley Martinkus did not want to go to a group.
Yes. Right. And I
And
didn't go. And I didn't.
right,
And
right.
Kristen, it took, well, it's kind of comical because let's say that was in 2003. I started my first group in 2009. So it took 6 years. And I tried a couple of groups prior, and one I was like, nope, not the one. And so even as I answered, like, there was some denial and shock for me, and I just wasn't ready. I also thought just a moment ago, I thought, I also don't know that that group opportunity was the right one for me.
Yeah.
I think there was a pause for me that was appropriate. And I probably, in some ways, just needed to trust myself in that, right? So what's comical though is then in 2009 is when I technically started my first group that I facilitated. And what I say today, Kristen, is if I had to line up all the things, and now there's so many more things, but we did couples therapy and I did meet with a couple of gals. And then again, I started that group in 2009. A year in, I stepped down as the leader of the group and we co-led the group and continued for years and years after. And that group, if I had to line up everything, the group is what was the most healing for me.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I have heard so many women say that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I just want to pause and take a deep breath here because I live in breathe groups. And so it's like, people might not want to listen to me that like, I think groups are incredibly transformational,
Yes.
like possibly the most healing thing
Yes.
because it's counterintuitive. And before a person goes into a group, many, many women have stereotypes, like based on movies and stuff, about what a support group is.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like maybe an SNL skit of a support
Yeah.
group or something where it's like sob stories and just a lot of drama and chaos. And
Mhm.
I just would love to encourage our listeners to like take a look at the preconceived notions you might have or your resistance and why you would swear to yourself that you would never do that.
Yeah.
And consider maybe now's not your time, but listen to what Shelley is saying. I would love to know more. Why was that the most healing and most powerfully healing experience in your recovery,
Yeah,
Shelley?
if I had to put it all, yeah, in order and in a line and could only pick one, it would be the group. And I think this dovetails well. I'll tell you why. And I think it dovetails well with this, pendulum swing to so much information and us needing to come back to the middle and there be a balance between information and deep work and deep healing work, if you will. Um, in the group, number one, there was connection and community, which is so healing. Whenever that's safe, I really needed to see that I wasn't alone. And so there was something healing week in, week out, showing up and just seeing like, oh my gosh, her too. She is saying what I was thinking last night, but was afraid to say. I mean, I literally felt like these women were reading my journals. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
I do.
I mean, so that in and of itself, and we know, I mean, the hallmarks of trauma are disempowerment and isolation. And so how do we heal from trauma? Well, we work at being in community and not alone, and we work at taking back our agency and our power in a healthy way. So, so just the community piece was huge. It's also the group process, in my opinion, a good group process is very slow. So this kind of counteracts this information overload because
Mhm.
in group, we're slowing down, we're giving women space to feel what they're feeling and to sit with it. Like you said, to sit in the discomfort. It's a slow process. The groups that I facilitate, we're in a group for about 2 years, I would say on average, all of us together.
Yeah.
And so we're not doing anything fast, but what that helps us do is it helps us go deep. It helps us scuba dive. When we slow down and when we really take time to hear one another, hold each other's hearts. And I think that ultimately, back to your question, I think that's what I needed. I really just needed a space where we could kind of hit the pause button on the craziness of life and just be with one another. And I also needed space to figure out how to be fully known with other women, to be intimate with other women, because what happened with Jason, I was like, well, never mind. Like pull up the drawbridge, put the alligators in the moat. I'm not going to be, nope, I'm going to close up my heart, lock it. I can't be intimate with anyone. I can't trust anyone. I can't be intimate with anyone. And the path back to myself was to find safe women. It wasn't going to be men. I thought all men were, I was terrified of men, safe women that I could sit with and learn to trust, learn to be intimate with. And then I started to take those skills and turn around and I started to use them in my relationship with Jason and with other people in, I'll kind of air quote, real life. Not that the group wasn't real life, but it was a safe, sacred space where I was learning things and then turning around and testing it out in real life. And it saved me. It saved my life.
That is amazing. I agree wholeheartedly that the group process, that safety, the belonging, right? Because betrayal is such a belonging wound, and we are creatures of belonging. I mean,
Mhm.
God belongs, he doesn't exist in isolation. Father,
Yeah.
Son, and Spirit,
Yeah.
Trinity, a family, basically, if you will. And when our
Mhm.
family is blown up by betrayal, that ultimate belonging wound, you're right. I love that analogy of pull up the drawbridge,
Yeah. Put
put
the
the
alligators
alligators
in
in
the
the
moat.
moat. I mean, it's like, yes, that's what we need to do sometimes, we think, and I'm
Mhm.
never going to risk again. but
Mm,
you took that risk with those women and it changed your life. It healed that belonging wound. It gave you a place to test your skills and
yes.
to use your voice, to take your agency back. I love that
Yeah.
so much. And you were able to go deep, to scuba dive with
Mm,
an instructor beside you, right? You're
mm.
not just diving by yourself.
Right.
And it's
Right.
scary, but you have people that are kind of, let's do it together. Let's do it scared together.
Yes. Yes. Well, and I think, and that's the other thing with the instructor or facilitator. I like to tell, and I want your listeners to hear this, as facilitators, we're still on the journey. We might be a couple blocks ahead of you or steps ahead of you, who knows, but we're still on the journey. And so I also it's there's a community effort for us to continue to push each other forward. We just can't do it alone because there's so much for us to learn from each other. And I think sometimes it can be intimidating to go into a group if we feel like the facilitator has it all together. And and maybe some facilitators do have it all together. No, but I don't.
You
I
know what?
certainly don't.
If they present that way, we've got a whole other situation going on here.
This is true.
If anybody presents that they have it all together,
Yeah.
that's a facade
You're
or a
right.
persona.
Yeah.
It's not reality.
Yeah.
We're all a mess. Like
Yes.
vulnerable. Maybe vulnerable is a better word than a mess.
No,
We're
I like mess. I think
okay, we're
we're messy.
vulnerable messes.
Yes.
It's human nature.
Yes. And it's refreshing. And so it can be so helpful just to be in that space with other women and just be like, oh my gosh, I'm not going crazy after all. To have those sorts of thoughts.
And then when you realize it's not just me, like she's saying things I've thought and I've never been able to express,
Mhm.
then we realize, oh my gosh, maybe I'm air quote normal.
Yeah.
Like this, what I'm going through
Yeah.
and my inner process and
Yes.
my agony. Maybe
Yes.
this is a part of the process
Right.
and I'm not doing it wrong. And
Mm.
there is no magic bullet.
There you go. There you go. I think that's huge too, what you just said. Like, oh, maybe this too is a part of the process. Just
Yeah.
for us to mirror back to our clients and to the gals in group, like, yeah, this is what I hear, this is what I see in you and what I'm experiencing from you. And let me tell you, I was there once too. And I can still be there sometimes as well. Like just there is such relief that we can see come over our gals' faces when they're like, oh, okay, all right. And then at the same time, the facilitator again is steps or blocks ahead. And that can be also very encouraging for women coming into the group. Like, oh,
Yes.
she's a real person. She's nothing special. And she got there. I can too.
It's very inspiring. Okay, I'm going to say something at the risk of it coming out wrong, but I'm
Okay.
going to try, okay?
Okay.
So, in terms of all the information and all the professionals and all the stuff you can find out there, listeners, like I have had this tendency, and I think it's a human nature tendency to think, oh, this one person, like this therapist that I'm going to go see for help, for example,
Hmm.
they're a therapist. They're like trained in this issue and they've written a book and they have a podcast. So they know what they're talking about. And we can end up putting them, the professional, on a pedestal, like and looking to them to save us
Hmm.
and thinking their knowledge. And if I just do everything they say, this is going to, but they're just as human as everybody else.
Yeah.
And they're not available for connection outside of that therapy time.
Right.
So it's not enough.
Yeah.
And it's definitely ineffective when you're looking to that helper as if they're a demigod, or as if they are, because that's what we do, right? We put people on a pedestal. We
Mhm.
think there's a hierarchy. That's our culture, is some
Yeah.
people have more power than others, and they clearly know what's going on, and we're the playing field gets really leveled in a group where it's like all these women in this same place, and even a facilitator just a couple steps ahead. And so there's no one person that we think this person's going to save me from this.
Right, right. And
So,
and thus we have to kind of look at ourselves a little bit more, don't you think? Like we've got
uh-huh.
the mirror kind of, I think that happens in group as well. And I'm sorry, I feel like I interrupted you, but I
No,
think like
you're
in the
good.
group setting, like there's a little bit more of, ooh, there's a lot of different personalities, and we start to like, ooh, she kind of rubs me the wrong way, and then we have to figure out why does she rub me the wrong way, you know? And oh, yeah, yeah. But back to
So,
what you were saying.
well, I don't remember just the fact that I just think it's good for our listeners to consider
Hmm.
some of these things we're not even aware of. Like the fact that I think this person's going to save me and help me, and like they know all the things, and clearly their life is better put together. And so I just need to look to them and do what they say, and then I'll be okay. We all want formulas. We all want somebody to save us.
Yeah, we do. We do. And you know
And his
what?
name is Jesus.
That's right. There you go. Yes, exactly. Yes. And it's what happens outside the therapy session that's really more important. Same with group. I mean, but that's where group's a little bit different. I will actually say.
Yeah.
Because I think something like in the showing up to the group, fully showing up to the group, I actually think some huge shifts happen in that space. Sure, we got to do work outside of it,
Yes.
but it is just a different, I don't know. There's just something different that happens that can simply showing up, opening up our hearts, leaning in. Whoa, it can be so profound.
Yes, friends, if this has been encouraging to you, I am going to put in our show notes links to how you could get a hold of Shelley, listen to her podcast, just find her in the online world and all that she has to offer. And we just do both together, hand in hand, say, join a group. That was not our plan for this episode, but go do the deep dive. Do the deep dive instead of the scuba dive, because that's where the healing happens, even through the discomfort. Friends, thank you so much for listening today. And if you haven't already done so, would you take a moment to rate or review our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts? That just gives more people the opportunity to find us when there's more reviews and ratings, and get the help and the hope that they need. And until the next episode, I am holding out hope for you.